part of my journey was that I took a sabbatical and I traveled around the world. And I mean, I was looking for answers and I found it in certain food, herbs as medicine, lifestyle practices, mindset shifts. And as a result of that journey, that was part of that, I say the grace of God, the hand of God in my life, but reversed the early menopause. And then I naturally conceived my daughter at 41, the child I was told I would never be able to have. Oxytocin is the hormone of love and connection. We make it ourselves, but it's also, and I mean, it really is a healthy aging hormone. It's a rejuvenation hormone. So, and it's the most alkalinizing hormone in our body, where cortisol is the most acidifying and oxytocin the most alkalinizing. So we produce oxytocin ourselves when we laugh, when we're doing things we enjoy, when we're playing, when we get a massage, intimacy, kissing, hugging, sex, orgasm. One of my best sleep aids is always progesterone, first and foremost. Like if you're not sleeping through the night, I say, let's cleanse, let's get your body to produce more progesterone. That 3 a.m. awakening is a cortisol spike. So you really have to reset your circadian rhythm for that. So like waking up with, I love that you're sitting in front of a big window, so getting early morning light and then getting outside for that early morning light really makes a difference.
The Big Silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
All right. Welcome to the Big Silence podcast, Dr. Anna Cabeca. How are you?
It is great to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
I know you're back in Texas where I live, and I'm here in New York City. So if you hear sirens, anything, that's the city.
That's the city. I'm like, okay, we're so close. We've got to connect in person.
Yeah.
Next time.
I know you were at the biohacking conference and I was there. I just realized that today because a friend of mine who saw that you were going to be on the podcast, she's like, oh my God, I met Dr. Anna Cabeca at the biohacking conference. So,
Oh yes, I want him to do more in Dallas for sure.
Yeah.
When there's events in Dallas, I love it.
yeah. So you have worked with over 10,000 women in person, then all your books, your podcast. And so reaching millions of women over 20 plus years, talking about women's health, sexual health, the big perimenopause, menopause, which is a big topic. I don't know if it just like, it's one of those things that like shows up for me because I've been going through it. And so talking about it, and so it's showing up a lot. But I really feel like there's a lot of women who want answers from someone like you, who are an expert in the space. And first of all, like, have you seen a transition over the 20 plus years of women opening up and the conversation being had around menopause?
Oh yeah, definitely. And especially since I've been in the space. And I've been a doctor for over 30 years now. And so early on, and I would say it's because my own mess happened, right? My own early menopause at 39, when I was told I would never be able to have another child and infertile. And I was just told, well, maybe egg donation would work after I failed like 6 rounds of injectable therapies and nothing worked. And so maybe egg donation, but you're in early menopause, an antidepressant, and some Xanax should help you, right? And I was really frustrated. And that was way back in 2000s. And so that started me down this journey as a young physician trying to figure all this stuff out. And there really wasn't anyone. We had Christiane Northrup, who wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. And she was on the forefront of having the conversation about, really like having a conversation, women to women, about hormonal changes and what's happening. And then she wrote The Wisdom of Menopause, which was another great book to just bring to the surface. But yet still it was hush hush. And you can't talk about it in medical communities because, the answers, the big pharma, the answers leads to big pharma, or just put them on a birth control pill till about the age of menopause and then stop the birth control pill. I mean, those were the only conversations. And in general, one thing I know is that when we are being raised with our mamas, we may notice that they go through something, but they weren't talking about it. I mean, I've asked my audience a few different times, like, what did your mama tell you about menopause? The answer is always nothing, nothing. So the fact that we're having this conversation now, and since I brought my first menopause program online in 2014, I mean, it's been a decade to really start bringing the conversation to the forefront. I think, Karina, honestly has a lot to do with more women physicians realizing what we've been taught isn't working for us. And we really need to, talk about this. And also just in general, more women physicians.
Well, you just made me feel not alone by saying you were 39 when you went into peri. Or,
Early menopause. I was diagnosed early menopause
yeah,
infertility, and then early menopause. Yeah.
yeah. Because let's see, probably 40. I was going and like started. So typically, like, let's talk about the symptoms of early menopause or perimenopause. I can say for me, I was clockwork. Full moon, I'm gonna bleed for since I was 13. And then all of a sudden it was like every 3 months. And I went to my OB-GYN.
How old were you when it was happening?
It was 2020, 2021. That was an interesting time for all of us as well.
Right. The pandemic stress.
Yeah, pandemic stress. My mother was passing. Um, all of these things going on. I thought it was just stress. And I went to my doctor and she's like, no, you're fine. Like your hormones okay. It's like, no, like this is like something's off. And then yeah, my last period was October 2022. And so I'm 43 now. So, and I had all the symptoms. I had the night sweats, brain fog. My husband's like, you're not remembering things like you used to. I'm like, leave me alone, you know?
Right. Men, there are certain things you should not say. No.
But let's talk about those symptoms, what they may feel like or be.
I do want to talk about that and bring back to when I was diagnosed with early menopause. I mean, that's that was a death sentence. It's like, that's it. That's your diagnosis. That's the end of the story. But part of my journey was that I took a sabbatical and I traveled around the world. And I mean, I was looking for answers and I found it in certain food, herbs as medicine, lifestyle practices, mindset shifts. And as a result of that journey, that was part of that, I say the grace of God, the hand of God in my life, but reversed the early menopause. And then I naturally conceived my daughter at 41, the child I was told I would never be able to have. And then finally kept, like the highs and lows of perimenopause again at 48, but finally through menopause at 56. So it's ovarian resuscitation that we can do. So those symptoms of the irregular menstrual cycle, so sometimes we can still even like resuscitate those ovaries and all of a sudden the clock starts working again and we start shifting. It just depends on our ovarian reserve. But there's so much to this, and stress certainly interferes with that cycle.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I learned through my own journey was, okay, what do we need to do to turn back the hands of time on the ovary, and how much can we do? And it's a whole mind, body, spirit experience, and it's creating the right milieu. But when those symptoms start, and it's not always able to reverse early menopause, but if it's stress induced, there's a lot that we can do. And again, there's so much that disrupts our ovaries. I mean, these are incredible glands, incredible organs, and they're refined, they're delicate. And so stress interferes with our ovarian production of hormones, more than anything. And then toxin, hormone disruptors, nutrient insufficiencies, all affect us. Pest thoughts, perceived or real stress, right? Negative situations like the whole pandemic stress. So many clients, so many of my patients experience disruption during that time as well. And so getting them back, kind of working with them to resuscitate the ovaries or regenerate or whatever we do, really work on harmonizing the body can be done. So it makes a difference. And I just say that to give hope, because sometimes we're given a diagnosis, but our diagnosis isn't necessarily our destiny.
Mhm. I agree with that. Yeah. So there is a way to kind of reverse that. And I've heard that through friends before who went through menopause in their mid 40s. And then now one of my friends is 52 and she's like, I have my full cycle back. I just like worked on hormones, vitamins, like all these things. It's like, wow. Because there's so technically, like after you haven't had your period for a year,
12 months. Yep.
you are at menopause. But then I've also that's like breaks some stigmas or rules. Like it's like, well, once you start bleeding again, then that could be unhealthy. We've heard that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even like I always say, I look for excuses to do pelvic ultrasounds. I really do. Because if you're having bleeding, postmenopause, any irregular bleeding, any abdominal pressure, pelvic pressure, discomfort is a reason to get a pelvic ultrasound, for a vaginal probe ultrasound to look at the uterus, the ovaries, to look for any fluid or abnormalities or cyst or thickening of the endometrial lining or fibroids, etc. And we got to figure this stuff out. And ultrasound is a very safe um, procedure, very, very safe procedure. So if there's, and that happens a lot. Any irregular bleeding, postmenopausal bleeding needs to be worked up. Always pap smear and an ultrasound. And yeah, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But it's true that I've had clients who, like, they start with what I call it the keto green lifestyle, and their periods start coming back, and it's really cool to see that, because that is a sign of reverse aging, and it's nice. But then I have clients in their 50s and they're like, oh well, I don't want my period back. I'm like, sorry.
I know, like part of me is like, this is kind of nice, and part of me like it feels like I just want to have it. I don't know what it is. It's just like something inside. But okay, so keto green lifestyle. Explain that.
So keto green lifestyle is what I developed from part of my journey in the digging deep into functional medicine and Western medicine and Eastern medicine. So I say world medicine, I don't discriminate. And so part of that journey, when I was 48, I was full blown in perimenopause again. At that point, I was a single mom. I had brain fog, um, you know, mood swings, irritability, loss of focus, inability to concentrate, unable to complete tasks, all those things. It was terrible. Plus, I was gaining weight without doing anything different. Like I had lost at one point, I'd been well over 240 pounds, lost 80 pounds and kept it off. But at this point, it was like 20 pounds came back on without doing anything different. And I always said, when my patients say that, I'm like, oh, well, let me check your thyroid. But really, are you really not doing anything different? And sure enough, there's it was not doing anything different. So it made me really, okay, well, what's happening to my physiology? What's happening? So that dug me into, first of all, eliminating all carbs, because I'm like, I don't want to gain another 100 pounds. I don't want to go down that trajectory again. And I want to fix what's happening to my body. So I went strict keto, which is something I used in my clinic for my patients with neurologic issues, with seizure disorders, with candidiasis issues, with yeast overgrowth. So it was very familiar. So I restricted all carbs and I started getting what I called keto crazy. And then I did what I would tell my patients to do whenever I did a functional detox with them. I had them check their urine pH. So urine pH is a measure of, as a physiologic measure, as important. It's a vital sign, as important as our heart rate variability, as our blood pressure, as our weight on the scale. But an acidic urine can say, well, you're not just getting enough minerals in your diet, or it could say you're producing way too much cortisol, because cortisol is acidifying. And so you can be eating the best diet and have an acidic urine because you're very stressed out. And my urine was at that when I checked my urine pH, it was as acidic as the pH paper read. So that means I was basically essentially maybe a pH of 4. I was peeing acid, literally. So you can imagine what that's doing to your bones, to your muscle, and your metabolism. So that can contribute significantly to weight gain. Plus, when we're pushing the cortisol gas pedal, we're depleting progesterone and pregnenolone, two very important neuroprotective hormones, which our hormones are derived from. Estrogen, testosterone, DHEA are all derived from progesterone. So now you're in this state where progesterone's really low, and the symptoms, the worsening PMS, moodiness before your cycle, decreased menstrual cycle or a spread out menstrual cycle, heavier and more painful periods, can be hair loss, weight gain, mood swings, heart palpitations, difficulty sleeping, anxiety, and inability to focus, all coming from this physiologic shift. So it makes sense. We can add progesterone on top, but we have to shift the physiology to be one, I say, more oxytocin based, oxytocin dominant, because oxytocin opposes cortisol, and support our hormones from this way. So that funnel, when that shift is happening, that decline, that sharp decline in progesterone, which starts happening in our mid 30s for most women because of the decline in ovarian reserve, less eggs being produced. So that can happen from 35 to 45. There's a significant decrease. There's over a 35% decrease in progesterone. And from age 35 to 55, there's over a 70% decrease in what our body's producing of progesterone just on its own. Add stress and you're worsening that. So that, if you don't have enough progesterone, you're not going to have your cycle.
Yeah. So how do we get more oxytocin? What's the best way that we can do that?
So oxytocin is the hormone of love and connection. And I always like to clarify, not to be confused with the pain medicine oxycodone, right? They
Right.
sound similar, very different.
Good
So
clarification.
yes, oxytocin is the hormone of love and connection. We make it ourselves, but it's also, and I mean, it really is a healthy aging hormone. It's a rejuvenation hormone. So, and it's the most alkalinizing hormone in our body, where cortisol is the most acidifying
Mm.
and oxytocin the most alkalinizing. So we produce oxytocin ourselves when we laugh, when we're doing things we enjoy, when we're playing, when we get a massage, intimacy, kissing, hugging, sex, orgasm, when you're in love, that is oxytocin. That is oxytocin. When you are, you know, expressing gratitude and being generous and giving and contributing to others, that increases oxytocin. And in medicine, we give Pitocin, which is IV oxytocin, in labor to increase contraction. So pregnancy, labor and delivery, and breastfeeding are ways our body naturally produces oxytocin. And evolve with that evolution, when we deliver this child, we are bonded. So oxytocin bonds us. It gives us this feeling of love and connection, just like with orgasm and intimacy with our partner. Oxytocin works to bond us and bind us in some ways, increase that connection.
So we
So
need
doing
more.
things you love and having a pet, your Pomeranian right there.
It's
Oh my
little
gosh, that is oxytocin, Karina.
fly travel with him.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
And so he reduces cortisol, right? So
Yeah,
he increases oxytocin.
exactly. And cortisol, and I've learned, so a lot of women ask me, like, you talk about the weight gain, and I had someone on my podcast just a couple weeks ago who gained 100 pounds, and she had early menopause as well, and was like, 100 pounds, like, what is happening? You don't change your workout routine, you don't change your diet, and it's this visceral that, and then, but no one, they're just like, oh, you're just, you know, like
You
there's a
need
lot of
to,
assumptions,
yeah.
and oh, you're just getting older, that's what happens. But then for myself, as I came out on the other side of, again, stress and tons of cortisol levels in my life, and I believe menopause, like the weight naturally was coming off, and I kept my routine, what I eat, how I move my body. Can you talk about that more? Because a lot of women, so this is actually, I want to read this from the community now. This is a question. She said, I started having perimenopause symptoms 3 months ago gained a pound a week for 5 weeks, even though I ate less and worked out even more. I'm getting headaches. I'm irritable, trouble sleeping for the first time ever. I went to my OB-GYN and he said it was in my head and I've been watching too much TikTok. Said, woo, said if I'm not happy with my new pooch, that makes it look like because it may make her look like she got engaged because she's expecting that she should go get liposuction.
Whoa. She
Whoa.
should actually, the first thing she should get is a new doctor,
Exactly.
right? Definitely a new doctor. That's infuriating to me, and I'm sorry that she had that experience. When we go to our doctors for help, compassion, yeah, that's a challenge. And I think, she's experiencing what so many women experience. And then because of age or you look healthy and fit, they're like, oh, I mean, it's just in your head or whatever. Right. And they're not looking at full functional labs, full hormones, full thyroid. I mean, labs give us an indication, give us a blueprint often of what's happening. Now, with that said, I would say treat the patient, not the labs, but the labs are guideposts. They really are. And so it's important to understand. I want to show, I know that you have your listeners, but I wanted to show kind of this, if you can see it. But I always look at what she said, she's decreasing her sleep. So if we think of the hormonal pathway, as we age, we decline in progesterone and then estrogen. But progesterone is necessary for an important sleep nutrient called tryptophan.
Mhm.
Having healthy levels of progesterone keep tryptophan available and circulating and usable in our body. When we lose progesterone, it increases the breakdown of tryptophan. So you have less tryptophan, which means less 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is often a supplement we give for anxiety and sleep. Because from 5-HTP, we make serotonin, our anti-anxiety. So women, as they start to lose progesterone, they get anxious, PMS, moody, irritable. And that's because have less serotonin available. And from serotonin, we make melatonin. And in that same thing, you're getting anxious and then less melatonin available, difficulty sleeping, waking up throughout the night, not feeling rested when you wake up. So often we're just working down here. Okay, well, let's add some melatonin or let's add some 5-HT or let's add a sleep aid. Let's try to sedate you, give you trazodone to help you sleep or something like that. But we're going to work on melatonin, but we have to start up here. Progesterone is so important. And like I said, it gets depleted at times of stress. We really have to pay attention to progesterone and estrogen in women in perimenopause and menopause. We want to support the body's natural production, which is more important than supplementing. But then when we need to, we want to supplement.
What do we supplement? Help us.
Yeah. So part of my journey and that experience, one of the things that I learned that helps the adrenal glands, helps our DHEA and our progesterone is maca. So I used the herb maca when I was in Peru. They would say, well, if you're infertile, drink maca. If you're tired, drink maca. And then they would elbow my husband at the time and say, well, it's the Peruvian Viagra. So like, okay, well, we're drinking some maca. And then me as a scientist, I was like, well, what is in this maca? What makes this maca so powerful? And I like to hear, the stories of traditional medicine. How did this become even a medicine? And so the ancient Incan warriors would eat maca before they went into battle to give them more stamina, energy, and resilience. So they were fierce. And so maca became very indigenous in Peru as a very for energy, for fatigue, for so many things. Really became a staple, a medicinal staple. The composition of maca is specific. Its proteins are very unique. They're called macaines, and it's rich in arginine, which increases nitric oxide, which is how Viagra works, and that increases blood flow and erections. So maca is rich in that, and as well as some other really key nutrients like histidine, and so that helps with orgasm and sensation too. So it's really good and very, very safe to take. And from that, I part of my journey was as I traveled around the world, Karina, I was like, well, if this is a medicinal food, what else is there? And cat's claw herb called uno de gato in Peru is a very potent antioxidant. And both, all of these ingredients that I put together have science behind them. So cat's claw herb is a potent antioxidant, anti-carcinogen. In research, it's shown to be an anti-carcinogen. And it's this, this plant. And it's like, okay, well, what if I started mixing different things together? And because I couldn't stand the taste of maca, I started adding other superfoods like mangosteen and acerola and green tea extract and certain things to make it taste better. So I created a combination called Mighty Maca Plus, which is 30 superfoods together to support energy and hormones. And we see that improvement in DHEA and progesterone. Also, I added in this combination ingredients to help the liver detoxify. So all our hormones are detoxified through the liver. And it's kind of like, a way to support our body's functioning, so our liver function and our detox pathways, as well as give adaptogens and potent nutrients that work as antioxidants and anti-inflammatories to help support the body's natural production of hormones. And and it's very alkalinizing, so it works really well. So that became my staple. That's, I mean, it was part of the contributor to help reverse my early menopause, and now in so many other women as well. But it helps, we've seen scientifically, it helps improve adrenal function, DHEA and progesterone levels.
I've seen that on your website. You have like a kit or menopause kit, right?
Menopause kit, yeah.
So we'll put the link below. I mean, I may even, who knows? I don't know if I can reverse it. I don't know if I want to, if I need to. Like, do I need to? I'm like, if I'm here, I'm just here.
You are lovely and energetic, and you have such vibrancy around you. The key thing is like just it's continuing. We work each day to create the healthiest body possible. And so if we can support resumption of ovarian function, if it was, and we can look at testing to help me understand, but if it was a function of the, stress induced
Mhm.
suppression of your hormones, knocking out the ovarian function, it's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible that, it's hard to say. A lot of times when we look at, markers like FSH, LH, estradiol, AMH, that can help us kind of figure this out, and cortisol pattern throughout the day and see what we're doing. Because a high performing woman like yourself, right? You will push through, so much, right? Just by sheer will.
Yeah.
And so sometimes your physiology, however, is stuck. Like I can see, suppressed cortisol patterns or something like that. And so you want to reverse that, because in the long term, that's not good. That
Right.
ages us faster. So if we can resuscitate the ovaries, it's worth it. Now, would we want to inject peptides, et cetera, to support ovarian function? There's research in that area, at the Buck Institute for Brain Health and Longevity. But I mean, that's a lot too. Yeah.
I want to go back to sleep because I feel like that's another topic that's coming up more and more and more about the importance of a good night's rest. In your opinion, how many hours for a woman in her 40s? And what are your thoughts on melatonin?
Yeah, no, it's great questions. So one of my best sleep aids is always progesterone, first and foremost. Like if you're not sleeping through the night, I'd say let's cleanse, let's get your body to produce more progesterone. Let's start a good detox. I call it keto green detox. I add Mighty Maca. Then I'll add on progesterone topically, because sleep is so important. And again, if we don't have progesterone on board, we're not making enough melatonin. And if we need to, I think melatonin's a good supplement. I don't like it every day long term, except in certain situations. So I have a cancer patients that I have on higher dose melatonin, 20 milligrams, for instance, of melatonin versus, for sleep when you need it, 3 milligrams of a sublingual melatonin is usually good, or even 1.5 milligrams can really help. But giving those precursors to make our own melatonin, like 5-HTP, progesterone, that will that usually works higher up and then improves our body's function. And then again, can we reduce blue light exposure and EMF exposure? EMF, like we don't even realize our Wi-Fi on in the, you know, while we're sleeping can cause cortisol spikes, and we become more sensitive as we age. So, like, really making sure sleep's in a Wi-Fi free zone as much as possible and things like that to really help. So I think melatonin's a good supplement, and in higher doses it has immune support benefits. But I'll start top down. Now, how many hours do we need? Now, this is a really good question. And I think, everyone's a little different when it comes to this. And when I have patients, it's always a question like, how well are you sleeping? But the most important question that I think I ask and response I get is to, well, do you wake up feeling rested? So, however many hours you got, do you wake up feeling rested?
Me personally,
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that says you're not getting enough restorative sleep or
Mhm.
enough deep sleep, because you want to be able to wake up alert even without an alarm clock. And you don't want that to be at 3 a.m., right? Like at a decent after several hours of sleep, at least 6 hours of sleep. But typically we're saying 7 to 9. But again, the restorative deep sleep and REM sleep really matters.
Yeah, like for me, and I feel like all of my friends, and we're around the same age, we're all like, oh my gosh, nowadays, the past 2 years, we all get up at 3 a.m. because we have to go pee. And then we're up. It's like, I go to bed at 10. I try to do like a good 10 to 6. And I feel like I sleep pretty well. And then I have to go to the bathroom and then I'm up. But I also, going back to that Wi-Fi thing, I love going to sleep to a sleep meditation, which means my phone is next to me connected to Wi-Fi, and then I'm sleeping like that, which I know is bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I mean it's a disruption. It's a disruption. So if you can put it in airplane mode, download it, put it in airplane mode, and then just shut off your house Wi-Fi. But if you're in New York City, you're not going to be able to reduce that. But anyway, we do the best we can do. We do the best we can do. There are, for people that are really sensitive, I've had patients that are very EMF sensitive. We
Mhm.
really have to create Wi-Fi free zones, or, there's certain clothing that you can use, and blankets and shields type thing in extreme cases. But most of us are pretty tolerant. It's just, if we don't need it, why be exposed to it? And if it's possibly disrupting our sleep, that's even bigger reason not to be exposed to it. So when I see like perimenopause or menopausal inability to sleep through the night, adding progesterone, orally prescription progesterone, 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams, I'll often start people on my cream, my topical progesterone and pregnenolone cream, because pregnenolone is also a very good hormone for memory and mood. And so that's topical. And then we will add in oral progesterone if that doesn't completely help them sleep. So, and oral progesterone, the metabolites really do help get that deeper sleep. That 3 a.m. awakening is a cortisol spike.
Mhm.
So really have to reset your circadian rhythm for that. So like waking up with, I love that you're sitting in front of a big window, so getting early morning light and and then getting outside for that early morning light really makes a difference. And I talk about all this, and I had a patient in my office the other day, and she said, I made a commitment for this, like the month of May, that I was going to get up every morning and get sunlight for at least 10 or 15 minutes outside every morning. And she goes, I could not believe what a difference that made in my sleep and my energy. That was the only thing I changed. That was the only to do I put on my list. And she said it just made a huge impact. So, yeah.
And
So I love little things like that are free.
yeah, sunlight is free if you live in a place that has sunlight. I've talked about that before on my podcast, and some people are like, well, I live in Seattle, I don't have sunlight. Okay, topical progesterone. So where do you put that? Like on your arm, like where do you put topical?
So I created my balance cream. So it's progesterone, pregnenolone, and I added in tripeptides. because they're anti-aging, or they promote healthy skin rejuvenation. Like anti-aging is not a very positive way to say it, but rejuvenating. It also has some essential oils, so and smells good.
Yeah.
So I put it neck décolletage around the face because it get rid of age spots and fine lines and wrinkles. So it's very firming too. So what like the hormone, but let's be honest, seriously, I've worked with women for my whole career, over 30 years. And if it has a cosmetic benefit, we're going to use it. Great that it helps you sleep, great that it's good for your hormones. But so anyway, so the balance cream I put on face, neck, and décolletage. And you can put inner arm, lower abdomen, inner thigh, clitoris to anus, most important real estate of our body. You can also use progesterone cream in that area. And you can use it vaginally as well, very safe. So you can rotate sites, but typically part of routine for um, as we age. So for the skin tightening, and also because closer to the brain, I like to use face, neck, and décolletage area, thin skin where you see veins. So typically you won't put it on your buttocks because there's padding and it's not as readily absorbed. So inner arm, you can put it on as well. If you have small kids at home, I recommend putting in areas where, if you're putting it on your inner arms, you you make sure, or your hands, make sure you wash your hands real well. Don't cross contaminate with any hormones. It's really a big deal when you have men on testosterone creams or gel. And, if they've rubbed it on and then they go hug their wife or kid or pet their dog, we can see elevated testosterone levels in family members. So you have to be really careful. So usually we'll look at other ways to do that.
That's a good note because I have 5 dogs and they love to lick my skin. So
On the non-lickable parts then.
yeah, I can't get to. So back to waking up and feeling energized. So I don't personally drink a lot of coffee because I started having more anxiety due to the past few years. And so I don't like to have
Okay, so but that's telling you that serotonin, right? So the serotonin and melatonin productions are lower. If you're having more anxiety and difficulty sleeping, that's, from lower progesterone too. So anyway, go ahead.
okay, so I'll be ordering progesterone cream.
I would just send you everything. It would get you.
Please do. Yeah, and I used to just be like up in the morning, have my cup of coffee, get out the door, do my workout, but I'm definitely like a little bit more slower. So what are your thoughts on like caffeine and women, especially through perimenopause, menopause, when
Yeah, I
anxiety
think
can sometimes be higher?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to caffeine and alcohol and menopause, we have to put them both together because, well, first of all, I always say I'm a researcher at heart, so I look for the research to support my vices, like chocolate, caffeine, and alcohol, like chocolate, coffee, and alcohol. Those have been my vices in the past. So in menopause, tolerance does decrease. And it doesn't serve me any longer. And I really recognize that in myself. And as I put clients through nutritional detox, like with keto green detox, I'm like, I want you to take a break in the caffeine. I want you to take a break in the alcohol, and want to support your liver and all the, your hormones naturally as much as possible. So caffeine is going to increase cortisol. And I noticed that specifically because I drink black espresso coffee. I grew up, I'm half Palestinian. I grew up drinking Turkish coffee, Arabic coffee. And so I have a very high caffeine tolerance. So I can drink a cup of coffee and go to sleep, no problem.
Yeah.
But I noticed when I was wearing my continuous glucose monitor, and as I was working on my keto green program and my recipes in my books, I was wearing the continuous glucose monitor. And even though it was a black cup of coffee, no sugar, no oil, nothing else in it, my glucose was spiking 20 points. And that's because caffeine was increasing my cortisol, which was increasing my glucose. So it was part of the weight loss resistance that I was experiencing. It was contributing to it, even though it was a black cup of coffee. So that was heartbreaking, so heartbreaking for me. But then I figured it out because as I traveled, and I actually lived on a Brazilian coffee plantation for a little bit, some years ago for a couple months, and they don't drink coffee first thing in the morning. They drink it after their meal. So
Yeah.
at that point, you've eaten your meal and you have that little bit of espresso. Well, your cortisols and your glucose is already up from the meal. So, and the coffee itself is acidic. So it works as a digestive aid.
Mhm.
And that makes sense. So I just wait to have my coffee till after I eat now. So
So so in the morning too, and at night, or just
no, just in the morning.
Mm,
Yeah, because a lot of times caffeine after noon is gonna affect your sleep, and again, we're more sensitive in our 40s, 50s, and beyond. We really do, and the same with alcohol. We don't metabolize it as well.
mhm. So with that, like, if you're drinking a glass of wine, like, not before bed, or, like,
Not
if you're
before bed, it can disrupt sleep. So alcohol can really disrupt sleep. And when the research came out about and I love my wine. I do. But it's very, rare and few occasions now that I enjoy it because there's several things. One is first with the research that we heard about with resveratrol and red wine. And I always wondered, is it the red wine that increases longevity, or is it the people you're drinking the wine with at your table that you're having fun with, that you're laughing with, that you're enjoying? So when we look at these Mediterranean lifestyle and wine's part of it, they
Mhm,
have such community and fun. They're not drinking alone.
mhm.
They're not drinking alone. They're drinking with people in community, and that increases oxytocin. So it's the oxytocin aspect that trumps the resveratrol for sure.
So, oxytocin, I had someone on the podcast, a doctor, and was talking about, uh, isolation being worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Absolutely.
And, when I first heard that statistic, it's like, "Really?" And then you're thinking about coming out of the pandemic and how much isolation there is, and depression, and getting back to, personal relationships, and I can see that for sure.
Oh
Um
my gosh. Yeah. Okay. So, they always say the enemy works to isolate you, right? To make you feel alone. And that just reminds me of the Harry Potter episode. My daughter and I read all the Harry Potter books, but there's this one um episode where, oh gosh, what was her name? She was very angelic looking, blonde hair, and she's talking to Harry, and Harry says, I just have to go off on my own. I don't want anyone else to be at risk to get hurt, etc. And she says, that's what the enemy does. He wants to isolate you, and that's when he wins. And I was like,
Mm.
that's good. That's true. That's cortisol over oxytocin. So stay in community.
So, yeah, this is my biggest thing because I have so many questions here about cortisol. Like, how do I go against cortisol? It's like laugh, have fun, community, get good sleep. Um, I have a question here. So, OB-GYN, how often should you go? Because I thought it was annual. And then when I last went, they're like, oh, you're good. Just come back in 3 years.
Yeah.
Is that the new norm? Or
Yeah, so that's because pap smears are now recommended. If you've had negative paps and are low risk for a high risk pap smear, they say, okay, and your HPV's been negative. If they've done HPV uh, evaluation as part of the PAP, human papillomavirus, and negative for 3 years in a row, we can go to every 3 years with a pap smear. However, those are the recommendations. I recommend annual exams. As a physician, it is so important to do a physical exam because the body always tells us something. And
Mhm,
I had a client, and this is so important. I like to see an exam, maybe every 1 to 2 year. If you're low risk, same sexual partner, you're feeling great. I mean, do you need to have a pap smear every year? Potentially no. Every 2 to 3 years is fine. However, if you have high stress, you've had in your lifetime more than five sexual partners. If you have a new sexual partner, if there's any autoimmune issues going on, physical changes, etc., you should have a pap smear again every couple years. So I see this. I had a patient this week who is 72 years old, and the last time she had her pap smear, she was 50,
mhm,
and she's been treated with hormones and all this stuff, and it really it was important to see her because I talk about this because I had a dear friend who was 72, also very fit on hormones, worked out at the gym 5 days a week, and she had bleeding. Well, they said, well, let me adjust your hormones. And so she was treated by a good clinic here in North Texas. And it took them a while to do her pap smear and her ultrasound. By that time, she was stage 4 cervical cancer. So, the fact that they never bothered to do another pap smear on her, even though sexually active, on hormones, it's criminal. It's criminal. And it's because, what does the guidelines based on cost benefit analysis, what your insurance is willing to pay for you. Look, I'm happy to pay the $50 for my pap smear, test. I'm happy. Medicare will pay every year to 2 years for a pap smear. So there's no excuse for any woman over age 65 not to get it. Medicare will pay. Get your doctor to do your pap smear. So cervical cancer is so preventable and treatable when it's caught early. Stage 4, no. So anyway, so I made this patient who came to my office this week, and she's also 72, 71. And I said, well, I'm not going to prescribe your hormones. She's new to me. I'm like, I'm not going to prescribe your hormones unless I do a physical exam. She goes, oh, I haven't had a physical exam in years. And she goes, I don't want a pap smear today. So I'm not going to prescribe your hormones. I mean, I feel really strongly about it. I promise it will be painless. And, and I do an executive physical. So anyway, she was happy at the end, but she was like, I was told I didn't need them anymore. And I was like, well, I want to make sure that we are doing everything for your longevity and health for the long run. So that's my standpoint on it.
Thank
Even what the guidelines are, I'm like, just depends. Your personal risk factors. If you've ever had HPV, warts, et cetera, I mean, it's easy. Insurance typically covers it no matter what. Medicare covers it. So,
you.
no excuses, overage, whatever.
Go do it. It's not fun, ladies. It's not fun, but
No. And And pelvic exam, seriously, like, clients complaining of bladder irritability, increasing incontinence or bladder pressure or urgency symptoms, and getting treatment and never being examined. It's really a huge pet peeve. So
yeah.
anyway, feel
Let's
very strongly about getting a good GYN exam.
let's shift a little to sexual health, dryness, things like that as we age. Tell
Well,
us.
it is something I'm passionate about because, having gone through, trying for pregnancy at 39 and then having early menopause, and I felt all those things.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, what can we do with hormones to help this? I mean, estrogen only works on the mucosal layer. It's helpful, but it works on the mucosal layer, the first layer of the vagina. And if you have a male partner, it will transfer to him. Men typically don't need any more estrogen. Typically. Sometimes you're like, oh, let's give you some estrogen. But typically they don't need any more estrogen. And so, but DHEA works on all 3 layers of the vaginal wall, both DHEA and testosterone. So it works to the muscularis layer. So I started using it for myself, for my patients, and for clients with incontinence issues, not just vaginal health and sexual health, but for incontinence, started using DHEA topically and vaginally, and just saw all those symptoms go away. All those symptoms go away. And I have a client, she's 67 years old now. She got married at 62 and love of her life. And she says, she's one of my early users of Jelva. She's been using it for several years. She goes, Dr. Anna, my gynecologist says I have the vagina of a 25-year-old. And she said it made a difference in our relationship because intimacy is such an important piece of connection. And if it hurts every time you have sex, or because of dryness, there's microabrasions, you get a discharge or infection or bladder infection after sex, you're not going to want to. That is completely reversible. It really, really is. So, yeah.
You
So
have
we
that
can fix
too?
that.
I'm making my shopping list.
Julva. Julva for the vulva, and clitoris to anus, because you talk about vaginal estrogen, but what's happening to the clitoris? It's shrinking, it's getting atrophic, it's getting adhesion, small, like forget that. That is our pleasure zone with over 8,000, 9,000 nerve endings, more nerve ending. Our fingertip only has 2,000. Clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings. So you got to keep that healthy too. So oxytocin.
All right. And then one other topic I want to talk about with you is what are your thoughts on your best workouts during your cycle? So if you're still having your period and cycling your workouts, kind of like
Yeah.
a new topic. We have it in our app with workouts to do during your cycle, but just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think you have to vary. So in your second phase of your cycle, you have more progesterone. So that can be more strengthening, a good time for more strengthening um, practices because you're going to build more muscle, I think, during that time because you have more progesterone available. So then you'll have more testosterone at the time of ovulation. You'll have a little bit more testosterone in the luteal phase. And then, yeah, and I look at during the menstrual cycle is listening to your body to what is supportive for you. For that, I like really regenerative types of restorative physical activity. So if you're doing yoga, if you're doing walking, if you're doing some intervals during that time. So I would say it's always good to change things up and listen to what works best for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think listening to your body. And for me, it's like every day is a little different. Like, what are my energy levels? What am I doing? What are my stress levels? What will make me feel good? I think number one is getting out in nature at all times. There are parts of the month where I'm like, I just want to lift weights and it feels so good. And there's parts where I just want to go walk in nature. Like the past 2 days, walk in New York City. Totally different vibe than at home.
Totally.
But yeah, I'm very good at just listening to my body, not putting too much pressure on like I have to do this and then feeling any guilt or it's like the intuition of what your body needs.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important. Like we have to break away the noise. I just did a long walk. I did a 100-mile walk or 150 kilometers on the Camino de Santiago, the Portuguese coastal route. So I did that for myself to like celebrate menopause, to celebrate turning 58, like to demarcate. I'm like, go through this time of life and we don't celebrate it. Like we have to celebrate it. So for me, the Camino de Santiago was a celebration. And it was walking every day, like some days it was 40,000 steps, right? Or up to 20 miles in a day. And it was just the most incredible experience of my life. And because of the monotony of the walk, I felt like I shed so many layers of things that no longer serve me. You really start to become very, very present. It was the best meditative experience. I mean, I've done ayahuasca and plant medicine, all kinds of stuff. To me, the Camino de Santiago walking, and I did 7 days, 100 miles or 150 kilometers. That was probably the most therapeutic thing I've done in my life. And it was transformational. Sometimes we need to really connect with the present moment where we are and enjoying that, enjoying the journey as opposed to just focusing on the destination.
I love that. And I love that you say celebrate, you know, and pause in this because I feel like from the day we start our periods as a teenager to then the day we end them, there's this stigma of like, but like we are women and I think we need to celebrate more what our bodies are capable of and what they do. And so I love like just having these conversations and opening up the conversation where, there's shame in, oh, as a woman, no, you can't have children anymore. It's like it's a big stigma. Uh,
Right. Or you're disconnected from the waist down, right? Or you're not having your menstrual cycles. Well, are you still a woman, right? And then you have like all of society saying all kinds of confusing stuff. But this, you are wiser, healthier, refined woman. I mean, this is a period of menopause is a period of refinement, the journey. So how do we choose to continue to refine our lives? And I do believe the women that I know that have their amazing brains in their 70s, 80s, 90 years old, I mean, they are wise, powerful women. And I just want to keep that focus, the cognition, the ability, and the physical capacity to enjoy the rest of life, but to understand this is a transition and a rewiring.
mhm.
So being open to the possibilities of now what can I do that I
Yeah.
couldn't do when I was menstruating every month. No, I don't know.
Yeah. And that makes me think of something too about ending the stigma with men, and sometimes maybe it's just women that feel uncomfortable when they're on their periods and you have a partner, or men sometimes think it's quote unquote gross. And like, how do we end that stigma where men can celebrate us for what we're capable of? I mean,
That is a really good
not that
question.
you have to have the answer for
I
that, but
I think I think it is having the conversation, right? Like say, you know what I feel if you do, like for women, if it's something like, like I feel sexy during my period. I feel like I want to play. How can we do this that we both enjoy it? Or, to open up the conversation. It's often because I work in, sexual health. So I talk with couples all the time. And oftentimes they're not talking to each other about what they really want or
Mhm.
what they really like or what they don't like. And so like, is there something you want to play with, explore, to try to have these conversations? Look, we're coming into create a healthy space. We're coming into a judgment-free zone.
Mhm.
Tell me let's talk about this. And it's always better to talk like after so you do something fun after you've increased a lot of oxytocin. So like maybe you've gone to an amusement park or but the thing is like after sex, it's a great time for oxytocin. Women, we want to connect and talk during that time. Men want to roll over and go to sleep. So
Yeah.
it's usually not the best time to have these conversations because they're half asleep. But like to have a time to have a conversation where you're creating a judgment-free zone. And I had a client, she never initiated sex. And it was like, well, she goes, I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. She goes, I'm fine once we get started, but if he plays with my nipples, I just don't like that. They were married 15 years at this point. I said, did you ever tell him? And she said, no. I was like, you've got like this could be an issue. If you don't like something, you're not going to want to initiate something you're not going to have fun doing. So so it makes sense, but sometimes you're so in it. Well, he loves it, he enjoys it. I'm like, he just wants you to be happy. He's going to do what you enjoy, what makes you feel good. So let's try that and see. And it really did make a difference.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anna Cabeca. We'll leave it on that note, but there's so much information here. I appreciate you so much for taking the time to talk with me and the community, and you're helping a lot of women and men out there.
Thank
So
you.
where can we find you? We'll put everything in the show notes, of course, but
Thank
definitely
you. Yeah, so easy to find me at my website, dranna.com. So dranna.com. Often I run online programs and master classes, and also on social media at the Girlfriend Doctor. So definitely connect with me on Instagram or wherever you are, and definitely at dranna.com.
thank you, Dr. Anna.
Thank you.
The big silence. The big silence.